Well, we'd like to welcome everyone to the BYU Family History Library Sunday afternoon classes. Today, we're going to be talking about discovering AmericanAncestors.org. This is going to turn out to be considerably different than the other major websites that you might be familiar with. If you've never been on the website, you'll be surprised. If you've been on it and done a little bit of searching on it, you're probably frustrated. And so we'll just go right on into to what we have with American Ancestors. Mention at the beginning here that because of Family Search's partnership, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have free access to several otherwise subscription websites, including American Ancestors. And so this is a way that was accomplished through partnership benefits between Family Search and the partners on exchange of records and indexing and other resources. And I think that we have to, and this presentation will focus on American Ancestors, which is the website of the New England Historic Genealogical Society. I'll say more about that in just a moment. But the point here is that this website is structured as a database. It does have a family tree. I'll show that briefly at the end of the presentation. It is not an integral part of the website. It's not like Ancestry. It's not like Family Search. It's not like MyHeritage. It's not based on a big family tree with a lot of resources supporting the family tree. This is a very scholarly, very old society of people who are tremendously interested in detailed history. So it's a resource that it just depends entirely on whether you have ancestors that lived in New England. If you had anybody in your family, any family line that traces back to one of the New England states, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, all of those, the northeastern part of the United States, this website is the place to go for that information, period, end of story. Otherwise, you go in here and you'll look for names, for example, and you'll think, well, I never find anything with names with this website. And the answer is, well, probably not, because of a whole bunch of different reasons. That's because it's fragmented into a lot of individual databases that aren't necessarily integrated all together at a level that you would expect. It's more of a researcher's place to go to get information that is not available anyplace else. That's all that's the whole summary of it. Now, understanding that a free subscription is not the same as a free subscription to Family Search or Ancestry or Find My Past or MyHeritage, any of those, because it does not include all the records on that particular website. It only includes a selection of records, and so if you want to do research in New England, and you have ancestors that go back into the early colonies, this is the place where you need to be, and you may decide, as many of us do, as I have, to pay for a full subscription to the website, because the resources that I need are on this particular website. But I'd suggest this. I'd suggest try looking at the website, see what kinds of things they have, You don't have to log in to review the kinds of information and everything that's on the website. So do your homework and know exactly what you need from the website before you go and purchase the membership. And perhaps as I talk today, you'll get a kind of an idea of the kinds of things that are available that may be of great value to you and your research. I will talk about what you get with the paid membership primarily, but it also covers what you get with the free membership. It's difficult to delineate because it basically has to do with which databases you have access to if you have a paid subscription and which you don't have if you have the free subscription. So that's kind of the way that we look at this particular website. Now, if you start with your free account, you'll fairly soon find out which parts of the website and records are for full membership users. Because you'll click on something, you'll say, wow, I'd like to look at that Vermont database. And you click and it says access only for full membership. So you really need to take this particular website as it is and understand the value of what you're going to be involved in. In addition, there are so many other parts of this website as we go through it, and so many different publications and other kinds of databases that are part of this that give even more value to the subscription than just looking at a few databases online. And I mentioned that it's sponsored by the New England Historic Genealogical Society, and this is the oldest such organization in the United States. It was founded back in the early 1800s. It is, and it's quite different. The reason is both Family Search and the NGHS, or the New England Historic Genealogical Society, have a library, and the NGHS library is in Boston. And this is kind of this photograph, and this is the page where you can get into the Boston. Now, if you join the society, if you subscribe to American Ancestors and you pay your dues, you automatically part of the New England Historical Genealogical Society and would have access to the library if you wish to travel to Boston to do some research. So there's kind of a lot of benefits that would accrue to people who were very much involved and doing extensive research in this particular area. But you can also visit the digital library and the archives that are on American Ancestors. And as I'll go through it here in a moment, you'll find that American Ancestors has different parts. It has the Weiner Family Jewish Heritage Center, the R. Stanton Avery Special Collections, and a research library. And all of these areas that are part of the American Ancestors are available to the members, and they're searchable and they're very very important. And so if you have, for instance, Jewish ancestors from New England, this is another resource for finding a lot of information, because they have letters and diaries and photographs, newspapers and business records, genealogies, city directories, organizational records, a lot of things that about the area that you would not normally have. Now, they do go out a little ways. They do have records of other parts of the United States, a very few, however, and they have some records of New York and some of the other boundary states. But even within New England, there is more of an emphasis on Massachusetts, obviously because of the background and where this particular society was formed, and because they trace their ancestry back to the Mayflower and the earliest settlers in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They have a very extensive bookstore, and periodically they have sales, and they reduce the prices on all the books that they're discounting, and they have discount titles. These are generally newer releases, newer books, in some extensive ones. Some of the books have databases that are available in other ways online, but some of them are unique sets of books that you can't duplicate. You can't find all that information on the online. Periodically, they publish the New England Historic Genealogical Society Register, and it's a member-based nonprofit corporation, but it's been publishing this New England Historical and Genealogical Register since like I mentioned, the early 1800s, and there are hundreds and hundreds of volumes of this, and they are interesting because they're completely searchable. Most of them have been digitized, and now they're completely searchable. So all of these articles that have been written about specific families and specific lineages show up here in the Genealogical Register. And if you happen to key into one of these families, there's just a mountain of information that takes you well beyond what you could do on your own in doing research on records and whatever was happening there. The New England Register, by the way, is still being published. And as a member, if you pay your subscription to the American Ancestors website, you will get a copy of the register every quarter sent to you. And it's a very interesting, and actually have found some of my friends who have written articles in the register. And it's just kind of an interesting to see how people who are academically and professionally involved in genealogy write about their discoveries. So if you've ever wondered what the next step is, if you go forward in learning about genealogical research, and you want to know what people who are involved in it on a professional and academic level how they think about it, then looking at copies of the Genealogical Quarterly of the NEHGS Genealogical Register will show you that it is of exactly how these people proceed when they look at a particular problem. You'll also see, when you look at the inside of the register, you'll find articles, and you'll see it. They're amazingly documented. Usually almost every sentence in those, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's close to that. At least every paragraph has a citation to the exact source where the information was obtained. And so they're abundantly helpful, and they go back for many, many years. And you can view the digital copies on the website. So once you have the subscription, you're there with digital copies. You can go back through all of the earlier registers as they go back. And many of the copies are online, and they've now passed into the public domain, and they are listed. And here we have a list of New England Historical Genealogical Register that's contained in the FamilySearch.org research wiki. And now I can give a kind of a shout out here for the wiki. The research wiki has thousands and thousands of articles that describe every country in the world's genealogical records as far as they are known. And in most cases has links directly to the records that are online. And it's like a vast catalog of everything that is genealogical, all the helps, all the resources, everything that's there. And this is all free, and this is on Family Search. So as you get into your research, you most definitely need to understand that as you go back to the wiki and read and look at the Family Search Wiki, which is under the search tab, and it's called the Research Wiki on every page of familysearch.org, then you can get into all of this information and get an idea of how much information and where else it is available. There's another one that comes out every week. It's a mailing. It's like a newsletter that comes out. It's the Weekly Genealogist by American Ancestors. And this is more expansive than just New England. And it really talks about general genealogical subjects. And if you want to get a good idea of what constitutes news in the genealogical community, then getting this weekly publication, which comes through your email if you're registered as a full member of the website. I just point out in the screenshot that I have here that there's a spotlight on a cemetery databases, one from Ephraim City, Utah, and in Sanpete County, and it's a burial database for 2 city cemeteries. Now, this would be outside the records that you would find on Find a Grave or on a Billion Graves. These are records that are created locally that have been done by other people. In other words, what you get here is an update of information that tells you what kinds of things are happening and what is available through the larger genealogical community out there that you may not even be aware exists. So once again, you can view the past digital copies of the Genealogist on the website. And so it's another resource for doing some research. And then once again, quarterly, they have the NEHGS American Ancestors magazine. I've been reading this for quite a while, and I find extremely interesting articles and information. This is a process of assimilating not just the raw genealogical names, dates, and places information, but getting involved in a website such as American Ancestors and reading the publications expands you into the full story of the people, the culture, the history, all of the interrelationships, and who were the people that lived there and what they did and how they lived. And it's just there's always something that you can gain from looking at the magazine and reading it. Now, if you're thinking at this point, boy, this is a lot of stuff, yeah, and it's going to be even more stuff by the time I get through, by the way. But what you would see in this is that rather than being the kinds of like, say, an ancestry or whatever, that it's something you go to look at and then you're done with it, American Ancestors has more of involve you in a greater community with different types of databases and structures and magazines and other things. So, for instance, here's a list in the fall of 2021 edition of new databases that have been added to the AmericanAncestors.org website. And one of the things I wanted to bring out about this particular one is that they have Massachusetts Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston records, 1789 to 1920. And they've added, for this point, they'd added 30 new parishes. And then they have the Massachusetts Catholic Cemetery Association records from 1833 to 1940 and 4 new cemeteries. Now, let me point out something that perhaps many of your Irish ancestors came through Boston. They may have come to New York, but they may have also have gone to Boston, because Boston has a very substantial historically Irish population. And one of the problems that confronted Family Search, for example, was that because of the sponsorship of Family Search by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there were some problems, and continue to be some problems, of the church through Family Search obtaining Roman Catholic records. Now, it doesn't seem to be a problem in Italy or most of South America or in Mexico, but in the United States, it seems to have continued to be a problem. And so these records, the Catholic Church records that are coming into the AmericanAncestors.org website, are essentially records that you would never have seen. And they're coming in by the millions of records, and these are extremely valuable for tracking immigrants who came from a predominantly Catholic country like Ireland. And so you're going to find that there's a lot of records in here that are helpful, depending on where your particular ancestors came from and how they arrived in the United States. Once again, they're digital copies of the entire publication online, and some of it goes back to the point where they fall behind the 1927 cutoff for public domain, and so before 1927, they will be in the public domain and probably available on other websites like Google and or archive.org. That's archive.org. It's the largest repository for digitals, for public domain digital records. This is another publication. It's called American Ancestors 2020, and it's a project that they've gone through to meet the living descendants and highlight who are the descendants and where they are of the Mayflower passengers. And so we'll get into that just a little bit more right here after we talk about a couple of more databases. This is Vita Brevis, which is the blog for the American Ancestors. So you can go to the blog. It's a blog. It comes out regularly as a blog, and you can subscribe to it and receive notifications about the different articles and things that are available through going through more than just the records and the history, but the actual involvement of being involved with the families in New England. And then they have the database news, which is yet another publication, and that tells you exactly which new records are being posted to the website. I keep checking the early Vermont settlers website for one of my families that kind of ends in Vermont, and just recently found out by going through that process of learning more about more resources, found out there was another publication that was printed back in about 100 years ago that had done a tremendous survey of all of the early settlers of Vermont and had included my ancestor and stated basically that after an exhaustive search of all the existing records in Vermont, they couldn't find who his parents were and they didn't know who he was. So so I was kind of either confirmed in my inability to find any more records, or having to decide if I really didn't believe what they said and tried to find some more records in addition. His name is Samuel Shepard, by the way. Okay, so here's an interesting project from American Ancestors. When they say project, what they do is they're gathering names. They're gathering names and information from records, and so they're accumulating records of a specific focus group of individuals. So here in this particular one, this deals with what happened in 1838. Maryland's Jesuit priests sold hundreds of men, women, and children into southern plantations to raise money for the construction of Georgetown University. Now, you may not have known that. Most of these people did not die. They married and raised children, and they have identified 8,000 of their descendants through genealogical research. And this is a way to search for those people in that particular group and to hear the stories of their descendants. So this is part of the whole American Ancestors. If you look at the top of the screen here, you'll see American Ancestors. It's not something that you would expect, and it's not something that would be, say, totally integrated into everything else that's in the website here. This is another instance. This is as I just mentioned, this is the parish records of the Boston Archdiocese, and they are 937 bound volumes with 400,000 handwritten pages and 10 million names from the Boston Catholic churches. Now, your ancestors didn't have to be Irish to be Catholic, but Irish immigrants were predominantly Catholic. Those that came from Northern Ireland could possibly have been Presbyterians, because many of them had their roots in Scotland instead of Ireland. They were brought into Ireland by the British landowners as tenant farmers to in a sense drive out the indigenous Irish residents of the Northern Ireland. So depending on where in Ireland your people came from, they could be Catholics or Presbyterians predominantly. But in this case, these are records that have heretofore not been readily available to anyone. Now, we're going to have to talk here about the Mayflower a little bit. The Mayflower passengers came in 1620. They landed in November of 1620. And there were roughly about 100 people on from the ship that survived the first year of their, I can get the exact number, but it's not important to this discussion. But the people who survived were the ones who had descendants. Obviously, if they didn't survive, they didn't have any descendants. That's pretty obvious. But the General Society of the Mayflower Descendants has been working for well over 100 years to find and document every single passenger and all of their descendants for 5 generations down. So all the descendants of all the original passengers of the Mayflower have been totally, completely, exhaustively sourced, argued about, and they are like cast in stone. There is no argument about who these people were or are at this point in time. If you were to try to add some new information to a Mayflower passenger descendant, you just simply would be, it would not, whatever you had would be either a duplicate or it would be wrong. There is no question that the information that is there is complete and accurate as human historical research can be. If you did want to do an extensive research, and most of that research is taking place in England on original records in England by English researchers, and occasionally, about once every 10 or 15 years, they will find a new piece of information, which will then begin a process of review and discussion in the Mayflower Society, and that may or may not be added. And if it's added, then they will add it in and say, this is the qualification that we have. We now know this lady's parents. She may have been married to this person, but this is the information we have available. So it's not something you need to rely on. So, but if you want to know the information, if you want access to the information, there's 2 possibilities. One is you can buy the copies of what are called the silver books. They are the publications that contain the 5 generation genealogies of each of the Mayflower passengers. And I might mention that some of them have very little and some of them have a lot, depending on whatever circumstances. But now they're extending that down to 6 generations. So what does that bring you up into? It brings you well into the late 1700s, and with descendants of the 6th generation into the 1800s of tens of thousands and thousands of people who are related directly to these Mayflower people. So this is the source. Now, what's the advantage of American Ancestors? The books are in the completely searchable database with the information on each of these people. So you can go out and buy the books, which cost about $45 to $75 a volume or more, depending on which particular volume, or you can have the database and in this way find out the information that's correct, and hopefully at some point the people who are working on the family tree will finally realize that there's no way that they should be on there changing any information about the Mayflower passengers or their descendants, because it's all been done. It's perfect. It's completely done. So if you connect to this, by the way, the simple answer to the next question is, if you connect to one of these people, yes, you are a descendant of Mayflower. That's how you get there. But you better have pretty good documentation to go to the Mayflower Society, or the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, which is called the Mayflower Society. And they are very, they know their genealogy, and they will also assist you. If you join the Mayflower Society, they have people, even locally around the country, who will help you with your research into your family. You may find that you are a Mayflower descendant, and you may not. And they do publish the Mayflower Descendant, and this is a journal of the Pilgrim Genealogy and History, and it talks about specific families as they are highlighted, meaning the families who were the Mayflower families. It is a separate subscription, so it is not part of the website of the American Ancestors website. This is another one of these types of projects that basically closes the book on questions about who or who was there and who arrived and who didn't arrive in America during a period of time. And the Great Migration Project has gone on. It's been spearheaded by a professional genealogist by the name of Robert Anderson. And he and staff of people have been accumulating this for years. And what they have is the Great Migration Study gives accounts of all of the immigrants from 1620 to 1640 to New England. Every single person who came during that period of time, that any records that are available any place in any state or city or county or wherever have been examined, and those records have been compiled into this huge database. It's also a published book set. It's in the BYU Family History Library as books, but once again, this is a searchable database on American ancestors, and it's being expanded, and volumes are being published from 1634 up to 1635. The first volumes come from 1620 to 1633, and then their second set is from 1634 to 1635. And then there is another one up they'll continue this up till 1640. So it's basically, if you have ancestors that you believe arrived in any of the New England states, now states in the United States, then it was behoove you to get involved with doing some research in the Great Migration, so you can find out. If your people do not show up, I would suggest that you need to do some more research because this is an exhaustive study. Going on, there are hundreds of other unique databases, and you can see that some of them may actually fall way outside of New England, like Alabama deaths and marriages and Argentine baptisms. There's usually some kind of backstory as to why that particular database has anything to do with New England, but that's how they've gone ahead and selected these. There's also there's index of burials and marriages and baptisms from the American Canadian Genealogical Society from 1840 to 2000. And there's all these other publications that can be searched. And you can see that there's a pretty broad spectrum. If you say, well, I need to look for my ancestors in England, and then I would suggest find my past instead of my heritage, instead of American ancestors. But this is just an interesting and great place. Now, this is that when you go to that list of the databases, that's where you'll see the cutoff between the free subscription and a paid subscription for American ancestors. You'll click on a database and it'll say only available and with a upgraded, subscription. In addition, they have a lot of just sort of interesting kind of references, online references that otherwise would be part of different subscription services. And this one is an interesting one. It's the Oxford Dictionary of Family Names in Britain and Ireland. And it's an ultimate reference book on all the surnames. And it will tell the variants in the name, the origins, early bearers of the name, anything about the names, the background and the history background of the names. So if you're wondering about your English names, you can go here and get this entry. This is a book. Now you can some of these references, for example, if you were to go online and search for the Oxford Dictionary of Family Names in Britain and Ireland, you may be able to find that and get into it. But this is where they're all collected together, and you can gain direct search into. Some of them are subscription that you can't get in otherwise. That this is what it bears. Everything more than 20 bears, those that had more than 20 bears in the 1881 census. So that's the kind of the place where they started. And that's all the stuff that I just said about the variant spellings and origins and everything. This is Irish Newspaper Archives, and the Irish Newspaper Archives basically contains hundreds of thousands of pages of Irish newspapers going back in time, some of them back into the 1700s. As all of us who do Irish news research know, it is really difficult to do some kinds of research in Ireland because of the loss of records. And here's another source in a surprising place. That's a link. You could go directly to it, by the way, but here you get the subscription through American Ancestors. So there's some, they work away. So they go back from 1738 up to the current day with 6 million pages of newspapers and 279 years worth of Irish publications. This is a Quebec Genealogical, the Genealogy of Quebec, which is another website with family history and information about the French speaking Quebec population and their ancestors. Another one of the resources that comes along with this particular, with American Ancestors. So here's some idea of the number of records of baptisms back to 1621 and back to 1862, and Protestant and Catholic marriages and things. I'm sure you're probably getting a little bit overwhelmed with the number of the types of resources that are here and how they're individually focused resources. And so remembering that they're all there and then using them all becomes kind of a challenge. But from the standpoint of in my particular case, I have extensive, two major of my lines go to New England, and the Tanners, and also all of my Parkinsons, and all these people were from England. They're from a lot of them were from England immediately, but some of the New English families, the Potters and the Teffs and the Suttons and the people who lived back in those early days. And of course, the Mayflower people, Richard Warren and Francis Cook, and their descendants. So with all these people back there, you can go to each one of the states, and there's going to be research town guides for each of the states including New York, which is obviously not part of New England, strictly speaking, but has been included here. And you can visit the library in person, as I mentioned at the beginning. You can go there and receive help and do your time. If you're going to, let me kind of get back to this. There's an important thing here. If you are going to plan to go to visit, I get mentions and inquiries regularly that say, "Oh, we're planning a trip to Germany to look where our ancestors were born, or we're planning a trip to New England and we want to see where the cemeteries and the thing. Let me just mention that it takes a tremendous amount of pre-trip preparation to actually have a satisfying experience in doing that. It is not something where you can just go to the town and expect to find anything. Prime example from my own experience is my seventh great grandfather, 7 generations back, John Tanner, was prominent in Bolton's Landing on Lake George in New York. That was where he lived. The Tanner family came originally from Rhode Island, but he was there very prominent and a very wealthy person in the town. And when we visited Bolton Landing, we found out that his house had been already torn down years ago and that there were 2 condominiums buildings built on his property. So don't expect to find, in some cases, don't expect to find great, that connecting types of artifacts and things without a lot of preparation. The other side of the coin was, after spending a tremendous amount of research, because at the time, it was long before the internet was as big as it is now, I was able to find books that told me where the original Tanner, William Tanner's gravesite was in Rhode Island. And because of the information that I was able to find, we drove to the location and found the website happened to be on the 3rd tee of a golf resort in Rhode Island. But it was up in the brambles and the hill, and we had to force our way through the brambles to get up to it. And it was just a really interesting experience, but without the pre-doing of all the research, there would be no way we would have known that we had to go to the Laurel Lane Country Club and ask in the pro shop in order to find the cemetery. And once we were down there, we couldn't find it. Even when we were on the 3rd tee at where they told us to go. And if it weren't for some golfers who were coming by and asking if they knew where the cemetery was, one of them stood there and moved us around and pointed, and we could see a sign that had been nailed to a tree up there, which we could head for. And that's how we found the cemetery. So it's a process rather than something that you're going to just be able to do on the spur of the moment. You may want to take a trip to Germany or to Ireland or to England or wherever, just for interest purposes and to see where your ancestors lived, but only with a tremendous amount of preparation and knowing the exact records or the exact places where you need to go, will you be able to find those records. And this library is where you would go if you when you go there and you spend the time to travel there. Make sure you know what you're looking for and that it's there and it's available there and it's not available someplace else online. Okay, now I mentioned at the beginning that they had a family tree program. The family tree program is extremely limited from the standpoint that you have there's a cap on the amount of information that you can add, not just the number of names, but you can only put in like 5 gigabytes of information, which, by the way, is not much. And at that point, the website is locked. You can't do anything with it. You can't work on it. You can't do anything except look at it. And so unless you want to pay another fee outside of the subscription just to have the website, then you're basically, that's what you would have to do. So this is, so you can see there's not really an integration of all of these different products. It's just a large database website with a lot of information. Okay, well, thanks for watching.